Hey everyone, welcome to Limbo. My name is Joe and I'm your host, and today I have a special episode. My guest today is Reddy. Reddy is an amazing dude, basically. That's how I can describe it. I met him on Twitter a couple of years ago. He was one of the most positive, joyful individuals I've come across in that platform, and we've been talking ever since. And I knew I wanted to interview Reddy before, but all of the podcasts that I had were always like somehow focused on a niche, and I couldn't find a box where Reddy would fit. And so my goal with Limbo is having the most interesting conversations in the world. And I know that that's a crazy goal, but that's what I want to do. And the moment that I have that as a goal, I can invite anyone that I think that's interesting. And Reddy is definitely someone interesting. So I was extremely happy to be able to record this. So he has this philosophy of looking at life through the lenses of play, like playing with life and looking at life as a playground and seeing failure as part of your life and looking at your life as an adventure and pursuing adventure. And so throughout this conversation, we talk a lot about a bunch of different things, about play, about music, about being a child, about spirituality, about making fun of yourself. All of those are topics in this episode. And I really enjoy talking with Reddy. We do swear a little bit, so for those of you who are sensible to that, be aware. But even that is part, I guess, of the playing lenses that we use to look at life. I really enjoyed this episode with Reddy, and if you do too, there's a couple of things that you can do. First, you can leave a review of our podcast. That way, we can grow and get a bigger audience and have even bigger guests. I don't think bigger guests is the way to go to. But if you can leave a review, would absolutely love it. And also, we would love for you to follow Reddy in social media if that's something that you enjoy. Okay, so follow our podcast, follow Reddy. And yeah, a final note, thanking our sponsors. Thank you to Ulimbo, the restaurant in Lisbon. If you're in Lisbon and you want to like very good food, just go to Limbo. Just look for it. It's amazing. The owner is called Miguel. He's a friend, so go there. And of course, to the Socratic Experience. Now, the Socratic Experience is an online school where I work. We teach kids the way to self mastery through dialogue. And if you want to know more about it, just hit the link in the description or go to thesocraticexperience.com. That being said, here's my conversation with Reddy. Hi everyone, welcome to Limbo. My name is Joel, and today I have with me Reddy. Reddy, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, my friend. Wow, what a wonderful day. What a wonderful life.
Yeah, man, it's so good to do this. Like we've been chatting for a while now,
Yeah.
and like I was even thinking about, man, I should have pressed record before. And we were just chatting while you were setting up all the things and all of that, but that would be amazing. But yeah, I want to start with the story because I have so many things that I want to talk with you. And I want to start with like how I met you. So on Twitter. I think it was Anna by Interintellect that mentioned you somewhere, something like that. And I followed you, and you followed back. And then, like, I didn't know you at all. I've never spoken with you, anything at all. And you started to reply to some of my tweets with such a positive, wholesome, joyful vibe. And I was like, damn, like, so actually people in the internet can be really nice because I hadn't had that experience before, right? And so I've been trying to like get you on something that I'm doing. As I was saying, like, I've tried to build all of these different projects or different podcasts, but I feel like I was never able to push them through because I was looking at them from like a strategic perspective. And as we were talking before recording, like, I feel like the difference between what I'm doing now is that I'm focusing on one thing that feeds us all, which is conversation, right? We enjoy having conversations with one another. And so I guess that what I wanted to say is like, thank you for being here. Thank you for being like this positive, joyful force on the internet. I feel like we need more Reddys. And yeah, man, like, I think that, yeah, that's it. I'm just extremely grateful that you're here. And I want to start by asking you, like, how did you develop that attitude towards life. Like you were before we just press record, you said this beautiful line. You said everything is a feature, not a bug. And I would love for you to go into detail about like what does that mean to you, and also how did you get to the point of seeing everything as a feature instead of a bug.
Man, I'm not, that's something I'm trying to live my life by. I'm like, what, like right now, even to make this happen, right? Like it's raining outside. There was a power outage at my place, and like, I was like, oh my God, I have a bum knee, and like if I have to travel around, look for a place, pick up, I ran out of my coffee stock, and I was like, oh my God, I need to get coffee. Like everything seems to be like a bug right now. Just before making this, even the scheduling of this podcast, we were like, oh, our time
Yeah,
zones. It's just so easy to look at things as a bug. And I think like the beauty of life for me right now, the challenge, the spark is finding out how to turn that bug into a feature, right? Like,
yeah,
how can I do that? And I think about it in from the perspective of a child, right? Like if I was a child and to a child, nothing is a bug. Like because everything is curiosity, everything is excitement, everything is something new, everything is something interesting, everything is a challenge, everything is a puzzle to be solved. And I was like, starting from my whole play perspective of things, I'm like, okay, if I were to look at a bug, like in the adult world, in the grown-up world, a bug is a problem to be solved, right? But in the kids' world, a problem is nothing but a puzzle to be solved, right? Like,
yeah,
and I'm like, that's the perspective I want. That's the perspective I need. That's the frame I want to play through life with, right? Like, if it wasn't a bug, it would not be fun anymore. It wouldn't be exciting. It wouldn't be interesting. It wouldn't be challenging. It wouldn't bring me into the space where I'm like, ooh, how am I going to like, how are we going to get around this? Like when kids see something that seems remotely like a problem, like a bug, they're just excited about it. They're like, oh, it's a new game. It's something exciting. How are we going to fix this? How are we going to solve this? How are we going to play with this? How are we going to play around this? Right? And that's the framing I think the world needs right now because as grown-ups, we're just too stressed about everything around us. It's like, oh my God, things are falling to shit. And it's not just my own life, it's the whole world around me. The whole world around
yeah.
me is like, oh my God, there's climate change, the world's going to shambles, people are losing their wits, everything is going crazy. I am like, damn, if everything is going crazy, how am I going to enjoy my life, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that joy, the enjoyment of a problem is how I want to look at it. Like, it's not the problem per se, but it's what the problem brings out in me. The problem brings out this exciting playfulness, this looking at life as a challenge, just looking at life as something to excite me, to put me in this space where I'm like, oh my God, can I like can we still make this happen? Is this something
Exactly.
that's possible? And I think
Yeah.
it's that fine line between possibility and impossibility, right? Like whether it's just us two people on complete opposite ends of
Opposite
the
sides of
world
the world.
coming together
Yeah.
world, right? Like it's the same if Elon says that humans need to get to Mars. I'm like, how am I going to get to Portugal to have a conversation with my friend?
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, that's such a great answer because I feel like in a world that's filled with negativity, people that are able to enjoy themselves like are, always have it easier, and it's not like I feel like you do this very well. It's not like you're avoiding whatever problems or bugs there are, right? It's not about that. It's about like finding enjoyment in the process of solving them. Yeah, that's such a great answer. You mentioned like that the relationship between child and play, and everyone that knows you, and for those who don't know you, they're about to know like play is almost like a lenses that you use to see the world. And I would love to understand like how did you like was that something that you always had, always looking at the world like that? How did you end up in that place?
I think yes, to a large extent, I always had it in me. I always had this perspective of looking at things from a ridiculously childlike perspective. And it was easier when I was a kid because that's just what I did. That's what all of us did as kids, right?
Yeah,
I also love that framing because, like, let's say, for example, I'm trying to bring us into a mindful space of being, right? Like, when I say mindful, mindfulness seems to have these connotations. It's an esoteric concept. It's something that's so, I need to learn how to breathe right. I need to, work on myself. So I need to bring out this framing. I need to become a more calmer, loving individual to engage with the world. But it's difficult to explain to someone what mindfulness is if they haven't tried it out for themselves, right?
true.
But it's easy to tell someone what playfulness is because everyone has experienced that at some point in their life already. I don't
Got it.
I don't need to take you through a three-step process, through a 12-day cohort course, through a 30-day retreat on mindfulness in order to experience it. All anyone needs to do is just dial back into their inner child, their childhood, just think back in time, and like everyone is going to find that part of themselves that is like ready to go play. That's what all of us did as kids. Like, I don't care if you're an introvert or an extrovert. We all love to play in some form or the other, in some way or the other, right?
Absolutely.
And that's all it is.
Yeah, man, I love that. So it's not about like finding something new, like in mindfulness. Like I've never done anything remotely, so I need to go through a process to finding out what mindfulness is. And like what you're saying is not it's not about going through a process of finding something new. It's actually a process of remembering something that you already know. Because when you were a child, you were already playing, right? Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so, how did it? Like, how do you see besides like the everything is a feature not a bug, like what other ways you notice that play influences the way you look at the world?
So, for example, like, uh, life is full of problems right now, right? Like, the way we look at it, I can look at everything that my life is. My iPhone just stopped working last night. I had the whole green screen of death, and I'm like, an Apple is supposed to be like the most resilient product in the
Reliable.
digital ecospace, right? The most reliable thing. And that just conked out of me in the middle of the night. And it's like almost midnight. I'm trying to sleep, and I suddenly realize I can't set an alarm on my phone because the phone isn't working. I'm like, oh my God, this is a new problem, right? And this isn't as big a problem as Elon's Starlink, bursting in the middle of orbit or something. But to me, it's a problem right now. To me, it's like the problem of my life, right? I don't care if I'm trying to save the world or I'm trying to save my world. Right now, a problem is the only thing that's preventing me from playing, right? And even then, I don't want to look at it as an impediment to play. I want to look at it as an implement to play. How can I turn this thing that seems like a problem into a toy that we can play with? I'm like, oh, this is exciting. This is challenging. This is pulling me out of my comfort zone. This is throwing me out of my safe space into the danger zone, right? And I can choose to retreat and escape from the problem, avoid that problem, but then that sets me back in the level that I'm already in. How can I use this challenge, this problem, this circumstance to level up? I want to use this to grow. I want to use this to challenge myself. I want to use this bug as a way, as a feature to help me not only become a better player as an individual in this multiplayer game of life. And today's multiplayer game of life can involve a friend across the seas in Portugal, can involve someone I've never met on the internet, can involve even my own self, right? So that's the framing I'm trying to play with. I'm like, I want to play with problems. I want to play with trouble. I want to engage trouble as my playmate. Trouble is not someone I'm trying to run away from. Trouble is not this big, scary, demonic dude. But trouble is just this curious playmate who is throwing me a challenge and saying, "Hey, you think you can play with this? Let's see what you got."
Yeah, it's almost probably is a friend of me. Like I was going through your website and you're like, and I read that sentence. I was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense. Do you want to expand on that? Like what a frenemy is and why trouble can be that?
Ooh, yes. Oh man. So like, think about it. As kids, right? Like, likes and dislikes were a part of who we were. But like, the moment I'm playing with someone outside of myself, it's not necessary that our likes and dislikes match, right? Like for some reason, we've fallen into this one framing where we can only get along if our likes and dislikes are similar.
Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, sure, but what about the ones whose likes and dislikes don't match? They're our friends too. We just need to figure out different games we can play together, right? And that's where the frenemy concept kind of like kicks in. Like if you think of Calvin and Hobbes, right? The cartoon, the comic strip, that freaking tiger was like always like, pulling Calvin into trouble. Calvin and Hobbes were like, the whole game of life was to get into trouble together and then get
Yes.
out of trouble together. That's
Yes.
it. They weren't running away from it. They were running headlong into trouble. And if there was no trouble, if it was a boring, mundane, quiet day, they went
They
out
will
and made
find it.
trouble for
Yeah.
themselves.
Yeah, it's almost like because that's what's fun, right? Because
Yeah.
it's almost like the way you have fun is not living like this perfect life where everything just goes according to plan, because that's extremely boring. Like you can like sometimes it feels good, like you're in vacation and everything is like perfect and yeah, like all things are aligned. But like if you go through that too much time, at least for me, it's like, well, I kind of think that maybe something should be wrong, so you could have the fun to go and fix it, and yeah. So and I love that you bring Calvin and Hobbes. Besides reading Calvin and Hobbes, let's say because I guess that there's a lot of people, and you probably know this. Like you talk about this a lot. Like, do you think that people are usually open to that idea, or they're like in the beginning are they resistant to the idea of like incorporating play in their lives? What would you say the most common thing is?
I think right now it seems like people are scared, people are hurt, people are afraid, and people are triggered by the idea of trouble, by the idea of problems, by the idea of people unlike themselves, right? And it's so easy to fall into that us versus them phrasing, right? And I get it. Like back in the day when we lived by Dunbar's number, where, not more than a handful of folk hung around together. We were like, this is my village, this is my tribe, these are my people. Eventually, it scaled up and became this is my countryman, right? Eventually, it was just scale. We never actually grew beyond that. So, like the whole concept of civilization seems like a farce in the sense that it's just a scale. It's just like from a tribe of 100 people, we are now a country of 100 million people, right? Like whatever it is. Like the scale doesn't matter. What matters is the
Yeah.
framing that it's still us versus them. It's still, oh, the white guys versus the black guys, the Americans versus the Europeans, the Westerners versus the Easterners. It's so easy to fall into some framing or the other, which somehow can be given a righteous coloring to it, where, we're the good guys actually, they're the bad guys. Or if you look at the long enough timeline of history, at some point the good guys were the bad guys and the bad guys were the good
Exactly.
guys. So, like, when and where are we going to, like, leave that framing aside? And I think the internet is that leveling phrase, that frame today, right? Like, where it's no longer about where you come from, the language you speak. And now with AI, it's just taking that to the next level, where even now you could be speaking in Spanish or in Portuguese, and I could be speaking in Kannada or Telugu or Hindi or one of the Indian languages. And we could even have a real-time AI translation such that we could talk, real time. So when we have
Absolutely.
this level of tech helping us play together, the only limiting factor now is our minds. Are
Yeah.
we willing to get out of this? Oh, that's my friend, so I'm going to play. That's my enemy, so I'm going to fight. Like, even the concept of fighting versus playing. I'm like, hey, all play is a fight of some sorts, and all fights are a play of some sorts, right? So,
Yeah.
like, there is so much of room to kind of play with that nuance between those two extreme polarities of good and bad, right and wrong, white and black. And it's so easy to look at the two extreme polarities. I'm like, let's play with that tension. Even if we come in from two extremes of the playground, there is a middle ground in the playground, which is a safe space for us to engage in without hurting each other. And at some point, if that gets too boring, you know what, this is getting too boring. I need some spark. I need some excitement. I need some. That's why you bring in a little bit of troublemaking, a little bit of fear, a little bit of excitement. So my concept of a playground revolves around both a safe space as well as a danger zone. We need to have both in order to play. We can't always be in a safe space because then life gets boring and we take each other for granted because we assume that we're not going to hurt each other. But if there's an element of a danger zone, I'm going to be on my toes. I'm going to be like on the edge to the extent where it's exciting, but still not scary. Like that's the fine line. And that kind of changes per individual. So in my interactions, I'm always like, how can I keep it playful such that people feel like this is safe enough to engage with, but at the same time, it's a little edgy. It could be, oh man, this guy is starting to get on my nerves. But yeah, it's okay. I'm still not here to harm you. I'm not here to hurt you. But yeah, maybe what I say could trigger you, could spark you the wrong way.
Yeah.
But we're still here to play. We're still here to play. That's our bottom line.
Yeah, which is basically what we did as kids, right? And I feel like, as you were saying, like, well, we have all of these different cultures, but when we're kids, like, you can find common elements between the way all kids play, no matter where they are, right? And I feel like that's like the best proof that, like, there's something common to all of us, is that when you're like 2 years old or 3 years old, you probably want to grab stuff and pretend that there's something else, and you want to like run around and you want to hide and you want to be discovered. And I feel like, well, that happens everywhere in the world, right? And so, as you were saying, like, it's almost it, with people that I know that are near me, it's great that I can do that, but it's also important for me to realize that if I was born in a totally different country, I would still do the same from those people around me, right? And so, because play connects us all in that sense. And it's almost like what I love about that, about the safe space and the danger. It's almost like, so I was a jazz musician for a long time before having a wrist injury. Yeah, like when I went to college, I studied jazz. I wanted to be like the best guitar player in the world in Portugal. But I had a wrist injury. I had to switch careers, etc. But I learned a lot about music, and that shaped the way I see the world. Absolutely. And so, as you were saying, like the safe zone and the danger zone, I was thinking about the concepts of tension and release in music, where it's like people think that, oh, like the best music is music that is always like in tone. It's almost like it's always like solved, and it's like, no, that's really boring. And I would give the example. I would bring the guitar and I would play like always the same chord without any kind of tension. People are like, well, okay, that's fun, that sounds beautiful for like 14 seconds. Then I need something else, right? And the way you can bring something else is you invite tension. You bring chords that are not that aligned with the overall harmony, but then you solve them in the right way, right? And I feel like a lot of life is just this, it's just realizing when should I invite tension and how should I invite tension. And I feel like your overall approach of play is exactly that. It's like you're bringing tension into your relationships, in your conversations, but you're also providing the space for people to solve that tension and to feel like to land in a beautiful chord, right?
Yeah, man, I'm so excited by, knowing that you've come from a music background because I have no understanding of music, right? I'm like practically tone deaf. And I'm like, I have no idea what to do. But I want us to like, play with. possibilities, right? Like when I think of music, I'm like, there are seven notes, right? Like whether you think of it from a Western perspective of do re mi fa sol la ti, or the Indian concept of sa re ga ma pa da ni sa. Either
Yeah.
ways, it's the magic between the notes where potential and possibilities lie. It's the silence in the game,
Yeah.
right? Like I'm like that. What people call an awkward silence is that space of infinite possibilities. Like
Absolutely.
that's where I want to play. I want to play in that awkward silence. Like when I feel an awkward silence in the playground in a conversation, I want to just stay there, right? I'm not in a hurry to push the other person. Oh, let's say something, do something. Let's play a game, right? It's okay. Like we're just here right now. Neither of us has something to say. Like how beautiful is that? The two of us can just sit in a room, absolute silence, not feel that overwhelming pressure to do something, to perform, to play, but can just sit there and just say, hey, oh, so that's what silence feels like, right?
Yeah.
And maybe I'll teasingly pull you into saying something or doing something or playing something. Maybe you will. I don't know, but just being there in the moment, not feeling threatened by the possibility that something is wrong, but
Yeah.
feeling excited and looking at silence as a treat, right? It's not silence is not something that I just need to retreat into, right? It's not a backward energy where, oh, I'm moving into silence because the world is too noisy, right? Remember the Jamiroquai song, I'm going deeper underground, there's too much panic in this town. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, man, I love the panic in this town. I love the madness. I love it. And if we are going to go retreat into silence, it's because it's because we want to look at the chaos from a new perspective.
Exactly. It's
So
it's like a
silence
moment
just
to stop.
reframes it.
Yeah, it reframes everything. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was thinking when I was when I was learning jazz, and jazz lives out of improvisation, right? And so I was playing the guitar, and I had one teacher where like I was playing, and he was like, "Well, what do you think you can improve?" And I was like, "Well, I can play faster. I can play different notes." And he was like, "Nah, man, you're being an idiot. So let's do this, like, cause the guitar, like, if you play the saxophone or a trumpet or something like that, like you're breathing into the instrument, right? So you're playing and then you're stopping to breathe in, cause you can just keep playing because you run out of air. But in the guitar, that doesn't happen, right? I can go like I can spend all day playing that. I don't need to stop to breathe in. So what he told me was like, you're not stopping, you don't have any silence. It's almost like in a conversation, if you're having a conversation, like you would be the equivalent of like this extremely painful pain in the ass dude that doesn't shut up. And I was like, oh, okay, got it. And so one of the things that he told me was like, well, you need to play, but you need to breathe while you're playing, so almost like a saxophone player. And I had to stop in those silences. First they were very uncomfortable because I was like, well, but I should be playing. But then I started to look at those sounds as ways of reframing whatever I was doing next, right? So I stopped and I was like, well, okay, what do I want to do now? Right? And silence is like it opens that possibility. It invites that thinking of, well, what do I want to do now? How do I want to interact with this? And I remember that I teach in this school called the Socratic Experience, and like our classes are based on dialogues. And one of the things that everyone told me the first time that I got in was like, you need to lean into the silences, because once you do that and you don't feel the need to just fill all the space, that's when people can stop, think, reevaluate, and then jump into the conversation in a meaningful way. And so I feel like I totally get with you. Like, chaos is amazing. Let's not go like underground. Let's be in this chaos, but also learn how to stop and to look at it in silence from a different perspective, right?
Right now, when people are like, trying to converse with each other, like there's this overwhelming desire or need to dominate the conversation, whether it's an interpersonal conversation, whether it's a geopolitical conversation which is going to change the lives of millions of people across the world. Regardless, the skill that we lack right now is the ability to play like kids, right? Like, think about it. If kids could just be able to engage with each other without a chaperone above their head saying, okay, sit down, don't make noise, be nice to each other. Like, it's almost like we raise our kids in the framing that kids aren't able to play by themselves without adult supervision, right? And I am challenging that perception. I'm like, no, leave kids alone in the playground long enough and they will fight it out at first, but they'll eventually figure out a way, whether you call it a pecking order or whether you just call it a homeostasis of the playground. Because the way I see it, the playground is alive. It's not inanimate. A playground is an animate creature, an amorphous creature of people coming in together with different voices, different noises, different styles of playing, different styles of expression. And maybe someone will dominate initially, maybe someone will go into a state of submission, but eventually there's a harmony that, you know, given enough time in the playground, people will figure out how to play,
Yeah.
right? Like in jazz, leave the musicians alone. You don't need a conductor, right? Like the old school way was there needs to be one guy telling 100 people in the, in the orchestra
Orchestra or
how
something
to
like
do
yeah.
things, what to do, when to do it, how long to do it. Oh my God, just leave the kids alone. Right? And
Yeah.
that's what jazz says. Just leave us kids alone. We'll figure it out. We'll play. Maybe we'll sound like shit. Or maybe we will be amazing. We have
Yeah.
no idea, but just give us enough time to figure it out for ourselves, to fuck around and find out for ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like one of the reasons why I fell in love with jazz was that it resembled a conversation. When you're uh, like because you're improvising a lot and you're talking with everyone else in the band, right? And that's something that it's extremely hard to do with an instrument, but once you get to a point where you're actually good at it, it's like it's one of those feelings where you feel like you're talking using music, and that's just amazing. So how do we go about this? Like, how do we help people build like this notion of the playground? Like, because I feel like maybe people aren't open to that idea initially, otherwise we would be solving this. So let's say that you and I were trying to make the world play more. Besides reading Calvin and Hobbes, like what else would you recommend for people to develop this ability to play?
So one of the ways I'm looking at it, I think like right now we are a cognitively dominant species or society. Everything is being processed here. I'm like, let's leave this guy alone, right? Let's leave him alone. He's been playing a while. He's been in the space for a long time. We just gonna go sensory. Like, I'm trying to look at the play spectrum from a sensory, visceral space, right? Like, let's think of the five senses. We play with sound, we play with sight, we play with smell, we play with taste, we play with the senses of touch. Like everything in my metaphorical playground is a focus on the sensory experience, right? Right now, the only sense the two of us in this playground of this podcast room have is the sense of sound, right? All the other senses, well, there's this visual
Visually,
sense as well, but that's
yeah.
not as dominant. And I'm grateful for that because I think in the world today, the visual sense has become extremely dominant. As a physical species, we no longer smell each other. Like my dogs are brilliant. Like my dog would go up to another guy and sniff the other guy's bum just to figure out what kind of asshole the other guy is. And I'm like, that's genius, dude. One sniff and you know exactly what that guy's all about. Whereas I need to like shake hands and find out where they're
Yeah.
from and what they speak and what they did as kids. what they do as grown-ups, what their profession is. Oh my God,
Yeah.
that is information overload. We just need visceral senses. So if you and I were in a physical playground, probably we would just play touch tag, right? Like chase me around the playground, touch you're it, tag, now you catch me, right? Or like we play hide and seek where, I'm going to run away and hide and you try to find me, right? Like all of these are visceral, physical, sensory experiences, right? And if you
Yeah.
look at how people in the playground interact, the first step is never an introduction. Two kids meeting each other in the playground for the first time never ask each other, what's your name? Where are you from? What's your mom's name? What language do you speak? How long have you been playing this game? How long have you been in this
Absolutely.
playground? Like what brought you to this playground? Fuck that, dude. Do you want to play a game? I know a game right now, right?
Yeah.
So I never ask people their names when I meet them in person because I already know that carries so much of baggage in terms of identity.
Yeah.
I don't need that. You don't need that to play. I just want to know what we can do right here, right now, in the moment, in a way that is visceral, that is engaging our senses. Maybe we share a cup of coffee, which is why even today, at the end of the day, all we want to do to really get to know each other is either get pissed drunk because then all the masks and facades fall away, or we just get into bed because that's the most intimate space and playground left for humans to engage in. Or we start fighting each other. A drunken brawl in the street is probably one of the most physically engaging games known to any species across the planet, right? Like the problem with that is it's not sustainable. In all likelihood, one of us will hurt each other so bad that we don't want to play again. So
I
my
know.
game is
Yeah.
how can we keep it visceral? How can we keep it sensory? While at the same time keeping it sustainable enough to continue playing over, a long enough time frame.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because I feel like we've been talking a lot about play, and we've been talking about it in almost like this philosophical sense of looking at life through those lenses. But I feel like a lot of it is physical, as you were saying. It even relates. Before we were recording, I was talking about. I was telling you that I've been thinking about friendship a lot, and it's like it's these there's this balance between the internet being amazing for some things but also like being not that good for others. And so and I relate that with friendship where you're like um the when you meet someone, like the best friendships that you might have, I believe, like they need the physical part of it, like the getting drunk together, the brawling together, the playing together. That's extremely physical. And even though we're looking at it from a philosophical mental standpoint, which is great, in order for us to like figure out the principles that we need in order to bring play, there's a physical sense that we need to invite, right? And I feel like the same thing happens with friendships where like you can try and build friendships online, and you're going to be able to do for sure, but eventually all of those will hopefully get into a point where you're physically connecting with someone, because that's when you can smell the other dude's asshole and say, well, that's the kind of asshole that you are, right? so so I feel like there's a physical aspect of it that we need to bring. And so I guess that my question is like, how do you go about and do that? Like if someone else is listening to this conversation is like, yeah, I wanna look at the world this way, like what can they do physically in order to develop that capacity?
So, like, when I travel a lot, that's like a big test for me, right? Like, when I'm traveling to remote places, people don't know me, I don't know them, they don't know my language, I don't know their language, they don't know my culture, I don't know their culture. But, like, one of the things that really kicks off is a simple game I use of rock, paper, scissors, right? So, rock, paper, scissors, and like it's easy to explain to another person, even if I don't know the language, I can, kind of figure it out. It takes me less than 2 minutes to explain the game to them. It takes me less than 2 minutes for me to engage in the game with them. And that is still a space where we're not using this part of
The
the
brain,
brain in
yeah.
terms of, the whole processing of language and culture and nuances. All of that disappears. We're now united by a very simple, very basic game, which is still not physically engaging, but it still is not cognitively demanding of us being on the same level playing field of a language,
Yeah.
right? And now I can take it a step further and make it a little physically engaging by thumb wrestling. Kind of like, we put our
Yeah,
two
yeah, the thumb.
fists together
Yeah.
and we like thumb wrestling. Like now, it's almost like wrestling, which is the most primal game known to man. Because even if you think of it from the Grecian philosophers, the gymnasium was a place where physically men grappled. Like we grappled with our bodies, whether it was Socrates, you know, any of these guys, they were physical grapplers. None of them were just talking in a toga.
Yeah.
They were actually just threw away the toga and they were just like wrestling in the buff, in the sand, getting down and dirty, messing each other's minds and bodies up. And then when they were tired, then they would sit down and then, put back the
They would go.
toga. And now you have like now we're grappling with ideas, right? So I'm like a philosopher. I have a certain set of ideas. You have a certain set of ideas. We're having a heated, animated conversation around whose idea is better, etc., etc. But it's still a grappling of sorts, right?
Yeah.
And a wrestling match is also a debate of sorts. So this throws away that dichotomy of the jock versus the nerd. Oh,
Yeah,
you guys are just
absolutely.
wrestling on the playground. We are just like discussing like civilized human beings. No, we're all just wrestling. We're just all bouncing around ideas and thoughts and feelings in different ways. And I want to bridge that gap. And I find something as ridiculous as rock, paper, scissors as an excellent way to bridge that gap, or at least to
Yeah.
get the ball rolling.
Yeah, that's great because you can play rock paper scissors with anyone basically in the world, and it's like it's such a way to invite it's such a good way to invite playfulness. And I love what you're saying about how in old Greece, the philosophers weren't these people sitting in office and spending their whole day writing. It had a lot to do with physicality as well, because I feel like that's part of it. Like it's once you need to wrestle with the body and wrestle with ideas. I love that framing that you just said. Um, yeah, so you did mention. Let's go maybe a little bit into your own life, into your own journey. Like you mentioned that you traveled a lot, and when you're traveling, you're doing those things. And I remember that one of the first things that I saw from you online was like a journey that you were doing in your motorcycle through India. And so tell us a little bit about that. Like, what were you doing? How did that happen? What were some of the stories? Go ahead.
Man, so this is so much fun because this also brings us back to the feature and bug sort of a thing. So I find like this space between a feature and a bug is adventure, right? Like if you think of the hero's journey essentially looks at life as a bug, and then the hero just gets away. He escapes from that. He says, "This life sucks. I'm getting away from this." And then he goes on this adventure, and then he comes back from that adventure in this mature state of being where he realizes now that all the bugs he ran away from were actually just features for him to get better, right? And
Yeah.
if you look at the tasks of Hercules, they were just designed to get Hercules to think beyond his individual, self-obsessed, egoistic frame of mind where all he thought of was himself, right? Like when a man like Hercules starts thinking about the tasks that are given to him, they challenge him, right? Like for me, this adventure that I went on was that I didn't know how to ride a bike well. I just bought a motorcycle and I was like,
Holy.
yeah, I was just like, fuck it. I'm not going to do a course on how to ride a motorcycle. I am just going to intercourse with nature, with adventure, with possibilities.
I thought that you had like I thought that you'd been like biking for since you were a child. Jesus, you had no idea how to ride a motorcycle. Okay, got it.
Right? And I was like, okay, man, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to get a motorcycle. I kept falling all over the place. And at one of the places, I actually drowned my motorcycle. Yeah, I was swept away by the river in one direction. My bike is rolling away in another direction, and I am like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And I'm like soaked to the bone. It is like -5 degrees centigrade. I don't know how cold that is in Fahrenheit. And it is cold. It's snowing.
It's
I
cold
am
as
like
fuck.
13,000 feet up in the, in altitude. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm like shivering and like an idiot. I had no idea. I took off all my clothes because I was like, oh my God, I'm wet. So I need to get all these clothes off me. But then now I'm in my boxers, I'm freezing my tits off, and now I realize I made a mistake, so I put my clothes back on, but now my clothes are wet, which makes it even worse. And then I have one rope and I start pulling my motorcycle out of the water, and I have no idea about the right and the wrong ways of dealing with this crisis, right? But all I know is that I'm already nose deep in trouble, and the only way out is through. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it out. I'm trying to pull that bike in inch by inch. I'm exhausted. I'm not a big guy, so I'm, struggling to manage that big motorcycle and all that luggage, trying to pull it out of the water. It's all soaked. I bring it out, the motorcycle doesn't start. I don't know how to start it. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix a motorcycle. And that brings me to the most amazing thing on the planet, the human connection, right? All I had to do was stand there and ask for help. And this is the most remote part of the world. There are no people passing by. There are no villages even. There's nothing there for miles and miles and miles. No animals even, right? It's one of those super remote regions. And luckily, I find a supply truck carrying supplies to some remote part over there. And I'm like, hey man,
Jesus.
can you help me? And the guy's like, dude, there's nowhere I can take you. There's no villages, there's no transport dumps, there's nothing around here that can help you. I was like, where are you going? He's like, I'm just going to my camp, which is just a few miles away from here. I was like, okay, take me there. So I land up at his camp, and the other people in the camp are like, they get me fire, they get me warm, they get me a fresh batch of clothes, a dry set of clothes, they give me a fresh bunk bed, and they give me hot piping food, they cook food for me. And all of this is in the middle of nowhere with complete strangers. I can barely speak their language, and they are being so nice to me, and they don't know what I'm about. They have no idea what I'm doing. They think I'm an idiot, and and I am, because who else would do something so stupid, right? And I'm like, okay,
I didn't want to say anything, but maybe.
yeah. But I was so happy because I was like, I could have paid for the most amazing adventure motorcycle ride catered to by the most experienced experts in the world, but I would have missed out on this raw adventure of being foolhardy, getting into trouble, and asking for help, and people being compassionate and loving enough to help me out. They helped me fix my motorcycle. I actually rode my motorcycle on truck engine oil. I used the engine oil from one of the trucks to ride my motorcycle back. I continued for a month on that engine oil. That was
Superpowers.
yeah.
Yeah.
And man, the superpower was just another human connection.
Yeah.
That was just I probably shouldn't even be using the word human because, like, even a living creature, if it had snuggled up to me in that cold, in that dark, in that night, I would have survived if I had just snuggled up to a bear, for all you
Yeah.
know, right? If the bear hadn't eaten me, well, if the bear
Yes.
had, well, at least the bear didn't have to go hungry or cold.
Yeah. Yeah, I love how, because that's one of the things that I really admire about you is that how you're immediately are like, well, if the bear hit me, he didn't have to go hungry. He didn't have to go. It's almost like you're flowing through life, and you're like, okay, everything like it's exactly how it's supposed to be. I love that, and I want to go into adventure, but it's funny because you just told that story, and people might think, well, that's extremely careless. Like you shouldn't do that and all of that. But I find it fascinating because I was looking through your website and you have like a part where you say rules I play by, and one of them is don't be careless. And so I guess my question is, how do you navigate that tension between trying to do all of those adventures? Like, well, you know what, I have no idea how to ride a motorcycle, I'm going to buy one and travel through India. Like that to me, it might look like what being careless is, but then here you are saying, you know what, but don't be careless when you go about playing. So how do you navigate that tension?
So here's an interesting thing I actually do, and it's very practical in the way I pack my motorcycle on an adventure, right? Like I pack just a bare set of tools, which I actually don't know how to use. I literally don't know how to use those tools, but I carry those tools because that's my way of being that bare minimum viable carefulness that I have a set of resources that could possibly help. But I'm also being careless in the sense that I haven't practiced using those tools. I haven't learned how to use those tools. But here's the what bridges the gap between carelessness and carefulness is serendipity. I need to make space, like in music, I need to leave space for someone to fill in the notes or for me to fill in the notes. In this case, the serendipity comes from having the tool set, but I bump into someone and I ask them, hey man, I'm in trouble. I don't know what to do, but I have this tool set. Do you know how to use these tools? Can you help me out? Right? So there's this fine line of being prepared to a certain extent and also planning for unpreparedness, for planning to not be prepared so that I'm dependent on the serendipity of human support, human connection, human compassion, and human action of helping one another in times of trouble.
Yeah, like you have to really believe that human nature is fundamentally good to do that, which is something that I believe, and clearly you do as well. And I love how you're talking about preparing for the unpreparedness. Like, I was invited to give a talk a couple of years ago about improvisation in the world in general. Because once again, I was coming from a jazz background, but a lot of it was like I've realized that I developed like this meta skill of improvisation in all of these different contexts, and it's like I remember like, the first time that I really realized that was I was so I after leaving college I co-founded like this corporate training company, and I was teaching like these courses to companies in Portugal around soft skills. And I remember that the first course that I taught was on emotional intelligence, and I spent all this time like researching and preparing the course and all of that. And so we get to a point where it was like 2 full days, and we get to a point of I start, and the morning was divided into two parts. So first part a break, first part lunch break, then afternoon. And I get to the first part of the first morning, and I'm like, "Fuck yeah, this is going great. Let's go." And I say, "Well, people, let's take a 10-minute break." And I go at and look at my notes, and in the first part of the first morning, I would give all like I had said all the things for the full day. So I was like, I have zero plan at this. I have people like going for a smoke, and in 10 minutes they're going to come back, and they're expecting me to somehow continue to like do something. And so I remember that what I did was I actually like I panicked for a minute, and then I started to improvise games. So I thought about, okay, so what kind of game can we play? And I came up with like all these weird games, like you would write an emotion in a post-it note, you would paste it on your forehead, and people would have to like do the facial expression of that until it gets like all of these small things. And so we survived, quote unquote, on the morning, and then I spent the lunch break preparing the rest of the training, and everything went well. And so at the end of it, I asked, well, what do you enjoy the most? And everyone, literally everyone, was like, the games. The games were the thing that we enjoyed the most. And I was like, okay, so I was able to come up with that in like 9 minutes after 1 minute panicking. So like that's when I realized, okay, so this improvisation is something that we can work on. But the only reason why I did that was because I spent years and years working on improvisation in other contexts. So you being ready to improvise on the spot is something that you need to train, and I love that what you're saying of bringing the tools and waiting for serendipity for someone to help you with those, right? Which gets me to another question which we were talking about before recording, which is the superpower of asking for help. And I don't know, do you have comments on that?
Man, before I go into that, I'm really stoked about your example because I feel like, when you mentioned about those 9 minutes it took you to figure out those games, like the trigger there was in that 1 minute. I was obsessed with the 1 minute of panic that you were in, right? Like, and that 1 minute of panic is what I am always looking for when I go on an adventure. Like when I plan that adventure, it's like, where can I find that 1 minute of panic, right? And I feel like right now, that's what the world needs. We need to play with that panic that we're all experiencing. And it really doesn't require a 5-year plan to save the world. It just
Oh
needs
no.
that, right? You know it, you got it. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's kind of the space where I'm at. I'm like, how can I plan for that serendipity? How can I play with that panic? How can I ask for help? Because essentially, when you play a game, you are creating, like you could have come up with the best games in the world in those 10 minutes, in those 9 minutes, right? But what made those games work was the fact that you asked people to play them with you,
Absolutely.
right? So in this case, the ask was, hey, will you play this game with me? Right? And that's an ask for help. And here's something that I've found incredibly insightful and empowering for me is the realization that people love to help. People are alive only to help. Oh my God, they're just dying for
Thank you.
someone to ask them to help. I am like, I walk on the street, I have a flat tire. I never try to fix it myself. I'm just sitting on the roadside, looking around. Someone eventually passes by and says, hey man, do you need some help? And I'm like, yes, definitely. Thank you so much. Uh, I even if someone else is coming to help me, even if the company I bought the motorcycle from is offering roadside assistance and is probably going to send out a chopper to come and airlift me out and all of that jazz. These days, motorcycles are so fucking crazy. Press a button and someone comes and beam me up, Scotty, and then just take you away to civilization. I'm like, oh my God, can you just save me from the boredom of having to wait for someone to save me?
For a
Can you just
chopper.
sit by the side and have a smoke with me, have a conversation with me, tell me about your life, or just tell me how stupid I am to be fucking doing something like this in the middle of nowhere? Just talk
Yeah.
to me, damn it. Like, just help me out of myself, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I think I like to do it because it puts me on the spot. It puts me in a space of vulnerability, having to ask for help, tells the world that, hey, Reddy doesn't have everything together. Reddy isn't as sorted as he looks. He's got this big bike with all these funky gears and tools and, everything about adventure all packed on his bike. But the idiot has no clue what he's doing. So maybe we should just help him out. And I
Yeah,
love
like
it.
yeah, it's like I want to go into the importance of like being able to make fun of yourself because I feel like you do that a lot, and I also try to do that, and I feel like that's a superpower as well. But just going back to the ask, I feel like a lot of people just they're afraid of asking things, and I don't get why because as you were saying, like people are very eager to help. And the worst thing that may happen in 99.9% of the cases is that people say, well, no, and that's okay. Like, okay, well, maybe you're an asshole. That's fine. You don't want to help. But like I remember speaking of asks, like I so there's this one of the stories that I tell was that working in the company that I'm working right now at the Socratic Experience, like I got that job because a friend of mine posted a tweet saying, "If you could ask for anything to anyone, what would you ask?" And I just wrote a tweet saying, "Well, I would ask the founder of the company to let me work on the company." And he replied to the tweet saying, "Well, send me an email." And I did, and I ended up working there. And like it's like you just need to. I just asked, and it was all fine if you told me no, but like that's the only thing I had to do is just ask. And I feel like a lot of people are scared of asking for help because they feel like, oh, I need to do this by my own. Because if I don't do it by my own, it's like, I don't know, it carries less value. It's like, oh, well, I had help to do that. Like, like if it's almost like, well, that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Like you connected with other people. Other people were made feel useful because they could help you. You know, so so yeah, I feel like more people should be able to ask for help. But I feel like we take ourselves way too seriously, and so we think, well, what will people think of me if I ask for help in this thing? And I feel like, as you're saying, like the like people going in like you want to have a conversation, maybe people just want to say, well, you're an idiot by doing this, and they're like, yeah, I am. So having that capacity of looking at yourself in that fun way is also a superpower, because it allows you to ask for help. Because if people mock you, you're like, well, I've been mocking myself for years, so that's fine. I don't need it's totally okay, right? So how, like, is that something that you developed, like the capacity of making fun of yourself, or is it something that you always had since you were a child?
Man, actually, it's funny because I have always thought that is the opposite in my case, right? Like, I never think of myself as making fun of myself. Like, I am like, when we laugh, I'm always like, I'm not laughing at you and you're not laughing at me. We're laughing with each other, right? Like, for example, if I'm stuck in the middle of nowhere, the same example where I ask someone for help, hey man, I have a flat, can you help me? And the guy is like, the example goes that he's an asshole and he says, no, fuck off. Like, it was your fault to do something stupid and come out here in the middle of nowhere with no support and no friends and no skills. So screw yourself. So I'd be like, hey, looks like you're having a bad day. How can I help you? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah,
Right? And I am like,
yeah.
assholes are the most lonely players. When I see an asshole, when I meet an asshole, I'm like, dude, who
How
fucked
can
you
I help?
over?
Yeah,
Right? Like, what the fuck put you in such a bad mood? Damn,
yeah,
I'm the one in deep shit here, and I'm like grinning from ear to ear. You seem to have it
yeah,
all well sorted, but you seem to be having such a terrible mood about you. Looks like you need a dose of me. How can I help?
yeah.
Right? And
That's
I'm
such a
like,
great answer.
yeah, because like, man, every, even an asshole is just another player that I haven't figured out how to play with. And an asshole is a player who hasn't figured out how to play with others in the playground. Right? So this
Yeah,
is just a skill issue. This is
yeah,
not an emotional issue at all. The poor guy doesn't know how to play with others.
dude. That's such a great answer. That's such a great answer. Yeah,
So
cause I
yeah,
yeah yeah just inviting more fun. Yeah,
it's like, I am like,
oh, sorry, you're back. So sorry, I lost you for a bit. You were saying that you. What was your last thought? You're muted. You're muted, by the way. What was your last thought?
we're back, we're back. I didn't say anything. I kind of like ended and then you were saying something, but I lost you in that.
Okay, got it. Well, yeah, it's like yeah, like that's such a great reframing of the question. But yeah, okay. So I wanna go into another thing, which is like the fuel that I use to look at the world in a positive way, to try to connect with everyone, to ask for help, to give out help, all of that. The fuel that I use is love, and you have a couple of like blog posts and writing around love and how all we need is love, and I would love to get your definition of it. Like, how would you define love, and what is its importance in your life?
Man, I really suck at love, right? I have no idea what it means. I just haven't been. I'm like 45 years now. I have no clue what love means. I have no idea how to define it. I probably don't even have an inkling of what love is. But for the sake of play, I have defined minimum viable version of love, and that's a hug, right? So I see someone, I hug them. I don't care, even if it's a cop who pulls me over for speeding, right? I am like, dude, do I have to pay the fine? And he's like, yeah, he's got this whole stiff upper lip and he grunts at me and he's like, right? And I will pay the fine, but I'll be like, I am going to pay you in hugs, right? Okay, sure. I swipe my card, you got the fine, fine. That's the system out of the way. Now it's just between you and me. You and me. This is my minimum viable love. I'm gonna hug you, right? And I don't care if you like it, don't like it. Like, I am going to give you a minimum viable hug. You may push me away. You may, like, kick me in the nuts for coming close to you. Those are the consequences I will live by. But that's all I know about love, man. All I know is that we are humans, we need to connect, and a handshake is a very important way of expressing that love. Words and conversations take too much time to express, and even then, it's a very, there's a lot lost in translation. So I am like, let's hug, buddy. That's all we got between us right now.
Yeah.
Maybe you hate me. Maybe I don't like your version of what play means. Maybe I think I'm better than you. Maybe you think you're better than me. Maybe we don't get along. Maybe we hate each other. But can we put all that aside and just give us a hug, a moment in time and space where we're connected viscerally, physically, with nothing else coming in the way,
Yeah.
right? And it works incredibly. Like, I have hugged policemen, I have hugged, drunks trying to beat me up on the road. I have hugged people who are like, I don't hug, dude. I'm like, all right, fine. Can we hug it out and then figure out how else we can connect? And they're like, what the fuck? But it works every single time. People are like, dude, I'm not a hug person. And then they're like, okay, that wasn't so bad, right? But don't do that again. I'm like, all right, just one for the road, just one for the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, I think we could all do with a few more hugs. A lot of human disconnect is due to the fact that we don't physically engage in common activities together. If you and
Yeah.
I were building a house together, if we had to physically build this podcast room,
Yeah.
our skins
Exactly.
would graze. At some
Yeah.
point, we would be heaving and lifting and pulling and pushing things together. At
Yeah.
some point in time, we would have to touch each other. We would have to hold each other. You would probably have to lift me up over your shoulders for me to reach something from us to, fix a light bulb above us.
Yeah.
Right? We would have to physically connect. There's just no way we could survive as a species without physical contact,
Yeah.
right? Like, I see my cats, two male cats are like constantly fighting over their choice of food, over their choice of mate, over territory during, you know, moments of engagement. There are other times when it's raining, when it's cold, and they need physical warmth. And they hate each other. They're just enemies, but they're hugging each other now because that physical warmth is what they need.
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I don't think that, that answer to me embodies a knowledge around love that's way bigger than what you were saying. Like we're saying, oh, I don't know how to. Sure, you might not know how to define love, but you know how to live it, and that's something that's way more powerful. Because like even before we pressed record, like you were in that coffee and people were coming to you, and you were with me with the iPad. You were like, "Look, this is my friend. We're here." And like all of that engagement, I feel like, and I've had a couple of conversations about Sav, a great friend of mine, Ayal, who doesn't understand this. He says that he doesn't understand why I dedicate so much, why I care so much about love, because he thinks that, well, it's another thing. It's like it's the good or something like that. But no, it's love. But I feel like that's part of that's like a key to unlock living life the way you're living it, right? Like you need, at least you need to love life, because there's no way someone has that amount of play and amount of fun, and amount of just joy if you're not loving life, because life is the ultimate playground, right? Whatever you're playing here. And so having that like that lifestyle demands you having a lot of love. Okay, ready. I have two more questions. I want to be respectful of your time, so I'll start with the first one. What's your relationship with spirituality? Like, I feel like every time that I listen to you in this conversation, read something that you write, like observe you on Twitter and the way you interact with people, I always get this extremely spiritual vibe. But I'm not sure, so I'm wondering, like, what's your relationship with spirituality and with the divine?
Man, I think I've always chased spirituality from my earliest years, right? Like to me, I rejected traditional parts of spirituality, and as a angsty teenager, the easiest path I found to spirituality was drugs. So I just dove headlong into them. I think from the time I hit puberty till my late till my late 20s, I was just like nose deep in addictions of different kinds. And like I was always looking for ways to get high, right? And to me, spirituality is about getting high. You're
Yeah.
taking the longer, traditional, diligent, disciplined path. I'm just taking the wild, uncharted, dangerous, full of, loopholes and dangers and trapdoors and booby traps. That's the path I took. But we're all just looking to get high and happy, because at the end of the day, the one thing that is clear with any path of spirituality is that the end goal is the same. Like there are many parts of the mountain. I'm just taking the most stupid, ridiculous, uncharted, foolish, dangerous parts, right? But and then I'm like, today when I'm like not dependent on substance to support that high, right? I've
Yeah.
understood that today my support system to stay high and to continue getting high and to reach higher and higher is another live human being. So
Yeah.
you are my drug right now to get high through this conversation. This conversation is our playbook, our spiritual playbook to get high together, which we are writing on the fly right here, right now in pure
Absolutely.
improv. We don't have like an orchestra has what do you call those sheets of music that you
Yeah,
have in
the
front of
sheets.
you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Like that's the traditional parts of spirituality. There are like, I mean, they just save you trouble. They help you get high. Like you can play wonderful music just looking at those sheets, and you can feel those tones that the people behind us left for us to help us reach those spaces within our minds through music or through every other experience, through pranayama or through meditation, through different techniques, through different yogas. There are different ways. I get it. I'm not dissing on your stuff, but those aren't the only ways. I'm sure there are easier ways, there are safer ways, there are more stable ways, there are more sustainable ways. But hey, man, I just want to fuck around. I like to do things the stupid way. I like to, make mistakes. I want to skin my knees. I want to like literally hobble my way
Even your
to the
meniscus.
right. And like,
Yeah.
so yes, every mistake I make is deeply spiritual in nature. Every interaction to me is devotional. I am immersed in this experience with you right now. I have dedicated my every part of my fiber of my being to being in this interaction with you right now, right? I
Yeah.
am expressing myself honestly. I am listening to you completely and soulfully and with every fiber of my being, trying to understand what you're saying, what you mean, what you feel, right? What could be more intimate than this? What could be more
Yeah.
spiritual than this, right? And
Absolutely.
even if you look at it from a, okay, if enlightenment is the goal, right? Like the whole idea of our human existence is a game. Think of it as the enlightened being got bored being enlightened and decided to fall from grace and go back through that cycle one more time. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Just for kicks, man, just for kicks. I was getting bored being enlightened. I wanted to jump into the fray one more time and play with Reddy, that stupid little kid in the middle of nowhere, right? And I'm like, all right, come on down, buddy, let's play another game.
Yeah. That's such a great answer. That's such a great answer. Okay, well, last question ready. What's your relationship with failure?
So I'm actually writing a book called Be Fail Friendly, right? So it's actually Be Fall Friendly, which is a very physical experience of falling off a motorcycle, falling when you're climbing on an adventure, falling physically, because that's something all kids do. Right? Now think of
Mm-hmm.
it. If you could rewind back to the time when you were 5 months old and you started trying to get on your feet, you fell once, you tried again, you fell again, you tried again, fell again, tried again, fell again, tried again. In a single day of 24 hours, as a kid who's not even a year old, you probably fell 100 times a day. Did that dampen the enthusiasm of a kid? Never.
No.
The parents around would be aghast. Oh my God, you fell down, you got hurt, and everyone would be like, telling your parents, oh my God, you're
Okay.
letting that little kid fall so many times. Do something, pick him up, take care of him, build a crash, give him something, create something where he doesn't fall, put a few pillows around. Like the world is aghast, but the kid is not even phased. The kid doesn't
Yeah.
care. The kid just gets back up and tries again, tries something else, tries something else, tries something else. I want that. I want that today. How many
Yeah.
times can I fall without losing this enthusiasm? See that glint in my eye? Oh my
Yeah.
God, how many times can I fall without losing that glint in my eye, that smile on my
A
face,
smile.
that enthusiasm to try again, right?
Yeah.
And that is the litmus test. Not all this bullshit I'm talking about, not all these books I'm writing, not all this stuff that I'm preaching. Look at me fall,
Yeah.
throw me down, kick mud on my face, laugh at me, and see how I respond. Am I going to hold it against you? Am I going to cry, fate fucked me over? Am I going to wallow in the trauma of that pain? Or am I going to get back up and say, all right, that was fun, let's do this again?
Yeah. Dude, that's such a great answer. That's such a great answer. And on that note, Reddy, I think that we can end our conversation. I think like that's such a beautiful way to end. And yeah, man, I mean I really appreciate you taking the time to be here. As someone, I told you like I'm trying to have the most interesting conversations in the world, and this was definitely one of them. So thank you for that. If people are listening to this and they want to connect with you, they want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about play, like what's the best place that they can do that?
I think Twitter is where I'm super active. I'm also on Insta. I have a blog. They're all ready to go. I think you'll probably drop the links in the
Yeah, the description. Yeah, yeah,
down
yeah.
below and stuff like that. Yeah, in the description. But man, I just love having conversations. For me, a conversation is a minimum viable game that we can play together. And I
Yeah.
so love you for making this happen. I'm so excited to be here right now.
Dude, same.
I,
Same. Well,
I
man,
love it.
yeah, I loved it as well. I love you, and yeah, I'll put all of that to everyone listening. ReadyToGo.com, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's your website. Yeah, ReadyToGo.com. And there you go, explosions. I like my kids go crazy when I do that in the classes with all of those reactions. But yeah, well, this was very fun. Thank you, Reddy, to everyone listening. If you want to learn more about what we're doing, subscribe to the YouTube, Spotify, whatever platform you use to listen to the podcast. And I'll see you all here in the next episode. Bye bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Big
A
hugs.
hug, yeah.